Anyone who has launched a community will tell you that the biggest, hairiest, scariest first challenge is finding your first 12 members. And especially when we're creating communities that are gathering niche groups of people around a common challenge or obstacle, and especially when that challenge or obstacle is taboo in our society, that can be an even more challenging feat to find those initial 12 members. So to help tackle this topic of how to find your initial members, we took an example from a letter that was submitted to us that deals with kind of one of the hardest situations of how you could possibly get a community started. And I am so pleased to have Murtaza Bambot on this episode because he just absolutely emanates the authentic honesty and transparency and kindness and empathy that comes from a really good salesperson. And I think sales are something that, as community builders, we're not always geared up to throw ourselves into. So I think Murtaza guides us through this process of finding those initial members from a really centered place of empathy and authority. And I am so excited for you to hear what he has to say. Welcome to Dear Bree, an advice column for community conundrums, fiascos, and drama. This season of Dear Bree is sponsored by our friends over at Heartbeat. Heartbeat is an all-in-one community platform, and it's the one I chose to host my own community. Your members can finally have events, conversation, content, and even courses in one distraction-free, intimate, customized home. I chose Heartbeat for 3 reasons. First, Heartbeat is unparalleled in their events management features. Events are a core part of my community architecture, and their features make my life so much easier. Second is segmentation. It's super easy to break my community into smaller, more niche subgroups and create a more customized experience for that group in Heartbeat. And finally, their courses. Being able to host my educational materials and learning journey in a community-first platform makes my community that much more valuable and retention that much stickier. I'm an affiliate with Heartbeat, which means when you sign up through my link in the show notes, I get paid a small amount at no extra charge to you. Thank you for supporting my work in that way. And finally, I usually record this podcast from Hawaii Island, so a special thank you to the Kanaka Maoli people on whose land I currently reside. Today's letter deals with how to grow a community where joining that community might be in and of itself taboo. And to help shed some light on this really important and significant dilemma, I've brought in the big guns. Murtaza Bambot, everybody. I am so thrilled to have you on this episode, Murtaza.
Excited to be here. I hope that I can properly be the big guns over here. We're going to see how well we can do, but I'm excited. This is going to be a fun one.
I'm here to hype you up, and I'm not done yet. So a little bit more about Murtaza. Murtaza is the founder at Heartbeat, the all-in-one platform for community businesses, also the sponsor of this podcast. And Heartbeat has served over 5,000 communities, serving customers like Bumble and Bubble.io. He was previously the head of community at the second largest startup accelerator in the world, Georgia Tech's CreateX. He is a self-identified, self-professed lover of sales. Said no one ever. So that's the big guns that we're bringing in. Lover of sales and product that's the big guns that we need on this episode.
This is my happy place. Sales and product. This is where I love to live. Yeah.
Oh my God, I love it. Because so many community people get into this, not exactly from the direction of sales. So it tends to be the skill, the mindset, the work that we have to do in community building, because as we heard in the episode with Ali Ball, build it and they will not come. You got to learn how to market it effectively. So I'm so excited to get your insights here. Also, just for everyone's context, I had the privilege of working closely with Murtaza to get the Heartbeat customer community up and running during a season of explosive growth. And I have to say, it is such a privilege to get to share this space with you again, Murtaza. I think I love the way that your brain works. I love seeing what you're creating at Heartbeat. And if you have been in the Heartbeat customer community for any length of time or been around Heartbeat customers, you'll know that one of the first things that they say and acknowledge is that part of why they're building in Heartbeat is because they believe in you and your work. So I'm just so grateful to have you on this episode.
I think that's definitely one of the things that we take a lot of pride in is, yes, it is a customer community, but it's also actually a space where you feel community. Like you feel like you can hang out with folks, you can chat with them. We've seen so many people build friendships and relationships. We've seen new businesses formed by two people talking to each other in the hearth. So I think that's definitely like one of the things that I don't think we expected to strike gold there, but we're obviously like very happy of just how much of a community that feels like. So no, that's so nice to hear.
Fabulous. Well, so glad to have you. Do you have any tea to share with us today? Because as this is a podcast about community conundrums, fiascos, and drama, are you willing to break the ice and share anything from your experience with us?
There's so many like weird dramatic situations that I found myself in. And there's so many times where I'm like building in the community space and I'm like, man, am I like back in high school or something? Probably like the time that comes to mind the most is actually when we first started working together with you to grow and scale the hearth. So what had happened is we had launched a deal on this website called AppSumo. It's like a big, you pay once, you get lifetime access to a startup tool. It's all startup. So like lifetime could mean 2 months. It could mean 2 years. And we had just listed there as a test. We're like, we'll try it. Maybe 10 people will buy it. We'll see what happens. And very quickly, we were disproven on that. And at this point in time, like we were still doing one-on-one onboardings with every new customer. So we listed with them, we were getting 150 customers a day through this website. And we were listed on there for a total of 3 months. So on day 2, I was already seeing the scariness of my calendar. We were just like constantly on calls with people, onboarding everyone, trying to be nice to every single person coming on. And the worst problem was that we just had like pieces of the platform that were breaking under so much load. We had like performance issues. We had all this stuff pop up. And everybody decided, hey, Heartbeat has a customer community. Let's go in there and talk through all of this. And I just remember the amount of angry voices in that community of the app sucks, everything's breaking, nothing works. I remember they would go on the AppSumo review pages and they'd review bomb us there. And I wouldn't even say it was review bombing because it was deserved. Like the thing they bought just started breaking 8 times over and over again.
Oh,
and
no.
So, yeah, I just remember what an insane time that was. The reason why I think that was like such like a community feeling is it was just like we had promised this thing to our community and we had very utterly failed to deliver it to them. And I just remember that the level of stress and even going to bed at night knowing that like I hadn't fully solved problems, I'd basically made like a 5% ding in any problem that had popped up. That was terrifying. I was definitely not taking care of myself for a good 3-month period. And that's also when I said, I think it was like a 3 a.m. Loom video to you, because I was like, I talked to Bree like once or twice, maybe 2-3 months ago. She was the community consultant that I was like, oh, that's the person I want to work with. And so I sent over a Loom video and I was like, please, dear God, help us fix this. And you responded. And obviously we started like working towards a lot of fixes. I think the biggest thing, honestly, that did that was, yes, we pushed the bug fixes and the performance improvements. But I think what we did more than anything is we just like constantly communicated with our customers. Every time something went down, we owned up to it. Every time we pushed a fix, we sent out a note. We were constantly jumping on calls with people. We take 2, maybe 3 calls to help you get started. And I think that like level of connection of both myself and my co-founder, Mehul, are just always reachable. That was the thing that got people through the other end. I don't know if I can 100% trust the software right now, but I can trust the team behind it and the software is going to get there. And thankfully now we don't have performance issues and we don't have everything breaking. But I think just like the communication is really like what helped us bridge this whole crazy time.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I don't think I knew quite the lead up to it, but I remember that 3 a.m. Loom video. Seeing the whites of his eyes. No.
The whites or the bloodshot reds. One of those 2 colors was in there. Yeah.
No, but I think that absolutely speaks to the trust that I've seen you build and nurture with your customers, because it's literally notable. Like the people who build in Heartbeat make a note to tell me, I decided to build here because I believe in Murtaza and what he's doing. And especially in the early days when the platform was a little bit of the underdog in that you don't have all the exact same features as maybe some of your competitors. But ultimately building that relationship with your customer on the trust that they have in you as a founder and as a team is going to take you much farther than having that like one shiny, sexy feature that they think they need today, but ultimately isn't going to be what they need in the future.
Totally agree. I think like the biggest thing that like we discount when we're building communities or tools or products is that people want to work with other people. And that human aspect is just so important there. You're never going to have a perfect product. There's no software that exists on earth that does not have any bugs. You're never going to have a perfect experience either, right? Like things break and you have issues. But I think if those human aspects in your business and the way you operate are really solid and you start from those first principles, you will build a really strong relationship and connection with your customers. And that's what's going to create the overall retention for the company, not just like how many nice shiny bells and whistles do you have.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I also want to call out that moment where you're like, and I think maybe a lot of organizations that run communities or community managers and organizations might resonate with this, that moment where you're like, woohoo, we've gathered everyone here so that when something breaks, they can all complain about it. You're like, we are on board with building community. But in that moment, it probably didn't feel like community felt like a very good business strategy. Or did it? How did you like reconcile that moment of, oh my God, the sheer volume of people complaining because we have gathered them? What now?
It's so funny. I think the very first thought that popped into my head was like, why the hell did I do this? I think that was like immediately just what kept ringing over and over in my brain is like, why was I this stupid of going out and inviting these thousands of people into a community and just like thinking everything was going to be hunky dory? Yeah, definitely had that thought. I think that kept hitting me over and over. I think what did help is I still have approached like every single call with a customer of a lot of empathy coming from our end, because what we recognize that our customers are doing is they're building an entire business on Heartbeat. And we built businesses. That's an insanely hard thing to do. And so I personally just have so much empathy and respect for anybody that goes out there and says, hey, I'm going to build something entirely from scratch and I'm going to put this out into the world. And so because of that, every single call that I showed up on, it didn't matter if you just had an idea on paper, if you had 2 customers, if you had 500 customers, every single customer got treated with the same level of respect of, you're doing something that's incredibly hard. How can I be a resource and how can I support you? And so I think that mentality helped, because when you have conversations with customers coming from that lens, every single conversation generally ends up in a positive space, even if you have not fixed everything for them. And so you'll talk to these customers, you'll work with them towards a solution. Sometimes they decide to stay customers, sometimes they decide to leave, but they'll always comment with, hey, this was actually very valuable in terms of just a conversation that I had today. And I think those like tiny moments and those tiny lights really helped guide us through that whole tunnel. And I also have this mentality of just when everything is on your shoulders and intensely stressful, sometimes the only way out is through. And that's what we figured is like, at the end of the day, it's probably going to end up fine, but we have to just keep going and get through. When I was a kid, there was a speaker that came to our elementary school. He was actually the brother of one of the students there. He was born with no arms and legs, and he like summited, I think it was Mount Kilimanjaro. And he was the first person to summit Mount Kilimanjaro with no arms or legs and no prosthetics. And like he had this mentality of just not dead, can't quit. And that's what I just keep telling myself over and over again is not dead, can't quit, not dead, can't quit. And that's literally the thing that I just kept repeating over and over until we got things to success. And I will say the light at the end of the tunnel is probably one of the biggest tailwinds that we have that helps us grow and scale up Heartbeat. If we did not have the hearth, we would be nowhere close to as successful as we are today.
Wow. I really love that insight. You said the only way out is through. Am I quoting that correctly?
Yeah.
The only way out is through. It reminds me of something that my friend in high school used to say back when I was on my... Did you have this like in high school and college? I got on like a kick of climbing rooftops.
Yes.
Yes.
I climbed everything. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's like a phase. And my friend would always say, there's always a way down. If we got up here, there's always a way down. It might be falling, but we will figure it out together. Yeah. There's always a way through. Wonderful. Well, are you ready for the letter that I have prepared for you today?
Let's do it. I'm excited to dive in.
Dear Bree, our community is just starting out and we're trying to grow our members in a curated way, but it's been difficult. Our members are women who experience chronic reproductive conditions like fibroids, endometriosis, and PCOS. It can be tricky to identify and directly reach out to these women and ask if they would like to join because these conditions are often considered taboo, or women just don't even know that they have these conditions because they're dismissed and misdiagnosed by doctors. Is this a terrible community model? I feel deeply compelled to serve women in this space, but I'm just not sure the best way to go about gathering them at scale. Do you have any advice or best practices for marketing your community in general and finding those first few members? Signed, Sensitive in Seattle.
Oh man, there's so much in there that I resonate with. I think just the subject matter, I'm obviously not a woman, but I get why you want a community around that. And if I'm just understanding correctly, a lot of these are health issues that specifically affect the cervix and the uterus, right? So it becomes really personal. It can affect, obviously, your personal health. It can affect your reproductive health. There's so many areas that it affects. I get why there are all these connotations around it, why you don't talk about it out loud. I also get how difficult from the sales aspect it is to go out and find people that do not want to talk about their problems because of a lot of the external fears, as well as just the intrinsic fears of, am I less of a person for having had this chronic illness? So I really empathize with a lot of those pieces. And I guess the first thing right off the bat, this writer is asking, is this a bad community model? And the biggest resounding thing that I want to say, just shouting from the mountaintops, is no. This is exactly why community exists in the first place, is to bring people together that are struggling so that together they can help alleviate a lot of that pain and a lot of that difficulty. If we think about who benefits from community the most, it is the people that are struggling. It is the people that are disenfranchised. Those are the people that have the most to gain from coming together and organizing as a community. And that's why you see most of the disenfranchised groups that exist around the world, when they build community, that's how they can actually move forward. So this is the textbook perfect case of where community actually makes a significant difference.
I could not agree more. I think that's what really got me excited about this episode was ooh, this is exactly the place where community is needed the most. And we have to show up as community builders and lean into these spaces where, sure, it might be difficult to find these initial members. We're going to talk about that in a little bit. But man, talk about the meaning and the impact. And if and when we do, how strong of a foundation bringing these people together who are all wrestling with the same problems. I like to say the product approach to providing value or solving a human need is, here is a product or service that helps with this issue. And the community approach is, here is a group of people who are all in the midst of this challenge or in the midst of this issue. And I couldn't imagine a more visceral need, whether or not they realize it. And that might be a part of the timing. And maybe you'll discuss that of how and when to target people who would be the right fit for this community. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. Okay, so to tackle this, let's start with this specific use case of how do we find those first initial members? Do you have any advice or insights from all of these communities that you've seen in Heartbeat and your experience in sales? How do we take the first steps here?
So this is a tough problem. I think Sensitive in Seattle, the way that I would think about this business is when you have something that is this personal, finding those initial members is going to be the harder part. Growing down the line will actually be easier, because what you'll find is that there's actually going to be a lot more word of mouth and a lot more referrals around this because of how difficult it is to start. So once people start actually finding it, it'll start catching along like wildfire and it'll start growing a lot faster. So both the good and bad is that your work is mostly front loaded and it gets easier over time. The immediate thing that I would probably think about here is trying to understand, where do folks that are suffering from these illnesses go for information today? My most immediate guess is it's going to be a Google search. And very rarely do I recommend a community start off with Google Ads. And by very rarely, like less than 5% of the time do I recommend this. I actually think that this is the type of community that really benefits from putting in not even like thousands, a couple $100s into just high intent Google search ads of, how do I deal with this illness? Like endometriosis support groups, like best practices, things like that people are already Googling, and having this pop up as one of the first results of, hey, can we get a landing page there? Can we get people to actually like click and jump in? Because it's so specific and because we already know people are already searching for it at a high degree. My other guess is that you probably know maybe 1 to 2 other folks that are dealing with this. And I would connect with them. I would also instantly just jump on a Zoom call with them. I would have the conversation with them. And what I would do is I would push them to see if there's one other person that they can connect you with that also is dealing with this illness, and see if you can just jump on a Zoom call, right? The pitch here is not come join this massive community and all this cool stuff that I'm doing. The pitch here is, hey, I have dealt with this, or I've helped people deal with this. Can we just jump on a call and talk about it? Because I want to get better at helping people deal with this. I think that as your entry point is going to be like the easiest thing. Don't sell the whole like big crazy community just yet. Let's just start there. Let's get some people on Zoom calls. And I think number one, doing that through some like high intent, like search ads, just a couple hundred, few hundred a month. Doing that also by reaching out to people would be like my like base camp, my step 0 of how I would actually start this. The next things that I would also be looking at is like, where do these people go and hang out physically? I think that obviously this is like a pretty difficult thing to talk about, but my guess is that there are like some types of support groups that already exist around this, right? So either having conversations with those folks of, hey, can we like put up some flyers? We're trying to do some more deeper level work with folks that specifically suffer from this and this. I would also look at like churches as another like common place to go to. It really depends on your location, because we talked about the judginess of some of this stuff earlier on. And so like you're going to have to read the room a little bit, but there are areas where it's just like pretty open, accepting, and you can go and post a lot of this stuff. And then the last thing that I would also think about is individual doctors' offices. I do think that there are a lot of problems with doctors dismissing the concerns of women. My girlfriend is a surgeon and we've had so many conversations about this, but there is definitely that problem. But I think the flip side of that of, hey, can I chat with this doctor's office? Can I just go boots on the ground, spend a day driving to every gynecologist's office in this city radius and just have a quick conversation? Most of them will tell you no, but even if 2 out of 10 say, yeah, you can leave a stack of flyers over here, that's a huge win for you. And that's what I would be doing in terms of just some of the most immediate boots on the ground stuff. So let me pause there because I just threw a million things at you, Bree. How do we feel about this as a baseline for Sensitive in Seattle? And then let's talk about expanding this.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's super applicable and relatable to people who might have a sensitive challenge that their community centers on, but even non-sensitive topics or challenges. That initial starting point of doing interviews, getting on the phone with people who are experiencing that challenge. And I love the call to action because it's so easy in those interviews for us just to have kind of a short-sighted approach and just focus on the interview and gaining the information. But what I hear you saying is take advantage of that opportunity to ask, hey, my goal is to learn more about this and how I can serve people in this arena. Can you think of one person who is in a similar situation who I could connect with? And then shutting your mouth.
That's the biggest thing is you got to ask the question and then shut your mouth 100%.
Just shut up, mute your mic, do not say more. I know this from personal experience because then the next thing that comes out of my mouth is like, it's totally okay if you don't.
Oh, yeah. You will immediately discount yourself in the sales conversation. Be like, please do this, but also it's fine if you don't.
No, do not do that. Just shut your mic down. Let them respond, give them pause, because what's happening in that moment is their wheels are turning and they're not jumping in and responding right away because they're thinking about a person who they could connect you with. And the more that you embrace that silence and give them the time to process, the more they're going to be able to actually connect you with somebody. So I love that. I always need that reminder. And came at a good time for me.
I still have to do that in calls, especially with like our larger like enterprise sales, because sometimes we're asking for some pretty large amounts. So I'm just like, hey, can you pay 20 million for community software? And then I got to hit the little button on my Yeti mic to actually pause the mic, because otherwise I'll totally blow it. So I think this is like, no matter how experienced you get, this is still a thing that you're going to like have to play around with, of just stop the self-sabotaging and just ask the question and shut up.
Oh, prime sales advice that we could all use. That's really good. And I like the caveat, what you mentioned about paid ads and the really specific use case of, hey, this is a super targeted person. They're probably Googling like really specific keywords or looking for really specific Facebook groups. There is a way to find this person online through paid ads. I'm curious just to follow that trailhead real quick. Like for people who, it sounds like for people who don't have a super specific target, the recommendation is not to start with paid ads. Am I right on that? Or what are your thoughts on paid ads for finding new members in general?
Yeah, that's what I would probably recommend is that if you are just getting started from scratch, right, you're less than 10 customers, don't start off on paid ads unless you have done a lot of paid ads work in your career before. This is as someone coming from, we spend a lot of money on paid ads right now as a company, but I had zero experience before coming into Heartbeat and building Heartbeat, how to use that. And I think that when you just don't know what you don't know, it's so hard to like launch paid ads and do any of that profitably unless you have such a specific use case like Sensitive in Seattle. And so instead, what I would start off with just for your first 10 customers is a lot more of this like boots on the ground stuff. Can I like cold DM some folks? Can I just reach out? Can I comment on some posts that people are making? Can I do like emails directly to people? Can I find them in existing groups online? Can I find them in existing groups in person? That's what I would go to, because when you have 0 customers, your job is just to get to 1. And when you have 1 customer, your job is to get to 10. You don't have to think about what 100 customers, 1,000, 10,000 customers look like. Don't build these things to scale at the start. Just start off with, okay, I'm at 1. What does it take for me to get to 2, to 5, to 10?
Okay, so question on that, because this is one that I get pretty frequently. And that I hear that for the product sense, like I got my 1 customer, that is a huge leap. The nature of community is that there are multiple customers coming in essentially at the same time because the value of what you're getting is from those interactions between your members. So how do you time that right in this scenario where you're trying to find your members, but okay, even if you get 1, you're like, that's still not quite a community and you want to invite people into a community. So how do you navigate that? Do you create a waitlist or what are some of the tools or ways that you would navigate that?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of waitlists. I think that just starting off from the highest level, you realistically only need 5 to 10 people to like actually start a community. That's enough people where you have enough diversity of thought and opinion on the call where you'll actually have some fun, pretty fluid conversations. It might not be this thing where every hour of the day you're getting a ping from your phone of all these new conversations starting, but you will have a place where people are actively connecting, they're happy with the value that they're getting, and they're building these long-lasting relationships. So 5 to 10 is the goal here, and I feel like that's a comfortable enough number to launch. I'm a huge fan of waitlists, and what I even recommend is on the waitlist, charge for the first month's rent. So if you're paying $50 a month to be a part of this community, it should cost $50 to put your name on the waitlist. And what I have done for literally every product that I've sold is I say, hey, put your name on the waitlist. It's going to cost you this much money. If at any point in time before we launch this thing, you get cold feet or you say, hey, you know what? I paid for this, but I don't think this is a good use of my money. Just let me know. I'll press 1 button on Stripe and I'll refund the whole thing, right? No questions asked. I'll be super chill about it. I've never had anybody actually take me up on that. So I think it's pretty easy to just build out these wait lists, set them up, and have people pay. I would also give people a realistic timeline of when the community is launching. And I think if you're going for 5 to 10 customers, if we're just talking about like Sensitive in Seattle's use case, I would realistically wager in 30 days, you should be able to do that. If you want to give an extra buffer, maybe 60 days. But realistically, 30 to 60 days, I think you should be able to go out and do this and get your first waitlisted list of customers that you're going to go out and launch with. And during those like 30, 60 days, just send like a light email update at the start of each week or every 2 weeks and say, hey, excited to have you on the wait list. Here's some new updates of what I'm working on with the experience and just like getting everything set up. And I think getting a quick snippet, a 2-minute Loom video, a 30-second voice note, something really basic that shows that, hey, you're still engaged, you're still working on this, that's going to actually get people more and more excited. And that's also going to prevent anybody from saying, hey, I've got cold feet, I don't want to do this anymore.
That's excellent. I have 2 really big takeaways from that. One is like capture the funds at the moment when they're joining the wait list. Don't have them just sign up with their email. Have them secure their spot with a payment. And number 2, the importance of continuing to nurture that relationship through transparent communication up until the launch of the community. I think I actually got that from you on another talk where you were sharing people statistically will wait quite a long time as long as you remain in communication with them.
Yeah. There's some big companies that have done 6-month, 8-month, 12-month wait lists. I actually did it with Steam when I bought my Steam Deck. To be fair, Steam is a massive company at this point, so it's pretty easy to trust them. But I remember I pre-ordered it in April. I got a lot of updates from them, and then I got the go-ahead to actually buy the thing in October. So you can do some pretty long wait lists, but exactly like you said, the communication is key. And especially if you're a new business, like that's why it's so important to charge up front. Because what you're gauging here is not, can I take money from someone else? What you are gauging is, does this customer set have this willingness to pay? And does that mean I could actually build a long scale business off of this? Because if you can't get people to pay the money up front, you can't guarantee that, hey, now I can get 10,000 people at $50 a month and make this much money. Like that math isn't actually fully checked off.
Absolutely. This reminds me so much of the conversation with Evan Hamilton at the very beginning of this season. Oh, we're just bringing it full circle with our bookends. And one of the things we said was most important test you can run in your community when you're first launching is, are people willing to pay for this community and for this? And as I am marketing it, as I am messaging it today. And so I hear this as a really nice bridge to help you confirm or pivot your strategy, because you can get that information sooner rather than later.
1+1 that I'll also add on to that, because this is another like really common thing that I hear from community builders is, for Sensitive in Seattle, don't shy away from this because you want to provide like a really good service and you want to be able to do that for people that are already suffering, already in a tough place, right? I get where you might be coming from when you're doing that, but I think one of the biggest like mistakes community builders make is just giving a lot of stuff free, just out of the goodness of their heart to do right by their community members. And for people listening on the audio, I really do mean air quotes when I say do right by their community members. I think that you got to charge up front because one, that money is going to tell you, hey, can I do this sustainably long term? But two, you deserve to be paid for the work that you're doing. Like you're putting in a lot of time and energy, and specifically a lot of just like emotional energy into growing and building this community. One of the best things that you can do for your members that are paying is ensure that it's going to be around for the long term. And while I can't guarantee that it'll be around if you do collect money, I can pretty much guarantee that if you don't collect payments up front and you don't make money off the community, it's not going to be around for more than a year or two. It is so hard to keep a community going when there is zero revenue coming in from it.
This podcast is sponsored by Ember Consulting, where I'm the founder and head community creator. At Ember, we help people who are familiar with running their business on content, coaching, or consulting become community powered. As you hear in this podcast, creating a community is really tough and managing it can be even harder. So don't do it alone. Whether you're looking to launch a new community or pivot your strategy, our one-on-one consulting helps you skip the learning curve and do it right the first time. And when you're ready to belong to a space just for community creators learning, testing, and growing their communities together, check out the Ember community. Now, back to the episode. Excellent. Yeah, I think a really helpful question to reflect for yourself on is, what would it take for you to show up as your absolute best for this community today and a year from now? And if you think a year from now you can show up as your absolute best self with no income from this community, more power to you. But I hope we can be really honest with ourselves and ask, what do you need in order to show up as your best in this community and to serve your community members well? And for us mere mortals, that is usually meaning some form of payment for our time and our energy and the value that we're creating.
Absolutely. Everybody's got to pay rent. And if you want to put food on the table, you want to pay rent, you have to charge for money. It's just like a nature of the universe.
To the trust fund babies out there who are listening, go for it. But if you're not in that camp, yeah, absolutely. Does this mean that there's going to be like a community waitlist payment function coming in Heartbeat sometime in the future? I'm like, oh, wait, I want this feature in Heartbeat. This would be amazing.
me a couple months. We just had the conversation internally about getting it like fully spec'd out. So the short answer is give me a couple months. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Okay, yes, I'm stoked. Can't wait for that feature. What a game changer. I want to shift gears a little bit and tease out this question. You're familiar with the three-lever matrix of community and business intersection. And we're talking about paid communities pretty exclusively on this episode. So I'm just going to stay on that side of my matrix. For those of you who aren't familiar, in this matrix, we look at communities that are paid versus free, and then communities that are education-centric versus connection-centric. All communities will have some combination of the two. But what I sense in this letter is that this is a paid, connection-centric community. Not necessarily, even though education might be happening in this community, they're not attracting people to help them overcome their fibroids. They're not attracting people to help cure their endometriosis, because that's not the intention here. They are looking to gather people who are experiencing these symptoms and these diseases who need to gather with and be heard, be witnessed. Yes, they need access to resources and support, but there's not like that clear transformation in the member of the community. And I've found those are a lot harder to market. It'd be so much easier to say, get your endometriosis cured. I don't think there's a cure for that. So we can't market that. That'd be lying. And saying, hey, gather with other people who have endometriosis. It's a verb. It's not an outcome. It's the process that we're marketing, not like a specific transformation or outcome. So I encounter this issue a lot. And frankly, even for myself, when we move into these connection-centric spaces, do you have any insights on how to market that in a way that's effective?
A lot of thoughts. What I would actually do is I would yes and your piece on, hey, this is more of a support-oriented community, because even with support and connection, there is a lot of learning that is happening there. And so if we think about what it looks like to live with a chronic illness, the biggest frustration, aside from obviously your health is being impacted, is the massive loss in quality of life. The most basic things that you have to do take forever to do. They are fraught with so much more decision making. It's really hard to do it. I have a really close friend right now that's suffering with an offshoot of Crohn's disease. So it affects a lot of what they can and cannot eat. Like going to restaurants is like a massive pain because you have to scan the list of everything that's on there and figure out, okay, like what is actually doable and what's not doable. And so that by itself will knock out like 95% of restaurants. So I think that there's still a transformation. And I think what we are thinking through here is for a community member that comes in, what is the actual meaningful increase in their quality of life after being a part of this community for 1 month, for 3 months, for 6 months, right? How do they go about their day? What are the things that does stress them out? What are the things that don't stress them out as they're going through that? And what are the things that like used to worry them that they don't have to worry about anymore? And I think a talking head testimonial of that is going to be way better than any like just great copy that we can write of, hey, before I was a part of this community with Sensitive in Seattle, this is what I struggled with. This is what I was worried about. This is what I felt like I was going crazy about. And while all of my problems are not perfectly solved, at least I feel really good about A, B, C, and D. And that's something I didn't expect that I would feel good about 3 months ago or 6 months ago. And I think that's more of what we want to have in terms of just testimonials and actual sales copy is what is the change in your quality of life that you can expect?
I love that. So even if you don't have as visceral as cure your disease, what is the transformation that's happening? And especially when it's more long-term, like part of that transformation is just having a place you can go to and the positive mental health benefits of that. I hear you say, make sure that you glean those insights from your members sooner rather than later so that you can attract new members.
Exactly. And part of this even comes from, I have an executive coach that I work with who's amazing. And I tell so many other founders, hey, you should go work with an executive coach because it's going to really help you on these personal things that you probably don't have anybody to talk to about. And I was talking with him and I was like, how do you explain what you do to people? Because it's a very like nebulous, up in the air, fluffy thing. And he mentioned this transformation piece being really important. But that's what I even noticed when I was telling other founders, like why an executive coach is so helpful, is it was like, I feel like I have a way better handle on my business, even though there's a million new problems and fires that we're fighting every single day. And I think like the biggest thing that I was telling people is I am a lot happier with how me, Murtaza, deals with problems and approaches everyday life today versus how I felt about myself 2 years ago. That I would write a blank check for. And so I think that transformation piece is going to go even further than just chronic illnesses. I think there are so many areas where, yeah, you're not going to give a dollars and cents number, but just hearing how someone feels before and after is going to make the world of difference of whether you actually swipe your credit card.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about this for myself because I'm using myself as a very specific example. So I am like a serial therapist firer. Like I'm really trigger happy when it comes to, I'm like, oh, season of chaos. Like I need a therapist. I need a coach. I need support. And then 3 months later, I'm like, yeah, I don't really need you. And then I fire them. And then I'm like, it's a vicious cycle, Murtaza. It's been happening for the last decade. And I underwent this like really significant shift this summer where I realized, because I think what hit me is like, in that, I keep using the word visceral because I think it's the best word to describe this. Like it's a visceral scenario. It's chaos. It's crisis. And that is always the prompt that gets me to finally get support. But that's also not the place from which I'm thinking long term about what's going to benefit Bree 10 years from now. So I'll usually pick the option that guarantees or markets the best, like quickest transformation to get me out of that immediate pain without considering what's the fundamental foundational shift that needs to happen inside over years, not like a quick 3-month thing, but what's the container? What's the environment that I need to invest in so that I can see that long-term change? I personally had this values shift where I was like, oh, I'm finally releasing the belief that quick transformation is going to give me the most impact long term. And that actually what I need is a relationship with a coach or with a therapist who I can trust and build over time so that in the highs and lows, I know I have a place that I can come to. And I've noticed my own community strategy has changed from that shift. And that's why I asked the question of like, how do you market that? Because I'm still not sure how to do it. But I think your insights of there's still transformation that's happening. Even there's like an old belief that I replaced with a new belief. So speaking to that. So I'm just sharing personally from my own experience, but I can definitely see that also applying in this scenario.
I think there's a lot of people that are in that same spot. I will say I've never heard of the term serial therapist firer, but I think that's hilarious. But I think there's a lot of people that feel that way because when you are in the thick of solving these problems, it just feels like it's taking so long. It's taking so much time. It's really hard. It doesn't seem like there's going to be an end to it. And then you look back 6 months later and you're like, oh, that journey was actually like not as bad as I thought it was going to be, right? Like it was a 2-week or 3-week or 4-week period of chaos, but then we figured it out and we got it wrapped up and all of that. And so I do think that backwards looking review helps a lot when you are like also thinking about, hey, should I buy this thing? That's why I think it helps so much, because when you look at it in hindsight too, that's when you can start to like really realize the transition and the changes that are happening and like how your mind is improving and like how your quality of life is improving. But like in the thick of it, like day by day, you're not going to be able to vocalize any of those pieces.
Yeah, well, and I think this speaks to, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I'm not the only person in the midst of this shift and recognizing the value in having a place where we can go long term, not just to get our like quick fix out of the chaos. I think that speaks to a greater trend of like us recognizing and shifting as a society back into a place of community first, rather than a quick fix of someone, either a product or a service or a coach who can come in to get us back on track. I see a greater shift where we're recognizing, oh, the real solution here might actually mean slowing down, finding an environment and a container where I can be honest with myself and those around me, overcoming this same challenge. And I see it as a greater societal shift back into a more connected, communally centered life.
I would agree that there's definitely this shift happening. I think, like you said, people are recognizing that the hard things are actually hard. and there's no quick silver bullets or cure-alls to fix it. And I have personally seen a lot of that, especially having been in tech for a little while now. I just think back to like how many things I have been promised by every tech tool over the last 10, 15-ish years and how amazing it was going to make my life. And then realizing, well, it improved this piece like 10%, but it didn't like make a radical transformation like I thought it was going to be. And I think people just started to see through the marketing copy. And as people just went on their journeys in their lives, they were like, oh, I really do have to spend time solving these problems. I can't just like plug in solution A and hope it gets perfectly fixed, which exactly like you said is a perfect segue into community of, well, if I've got to buckle down and solve this problem, it would be nice to do that with other people that are also solving this problem.
Really well put. I love how you summarize that. What other advice do you have for our friends sensitive in Seattle? Anything else you would share with them?
Yeah, I think that we talked a lot about just like the actual tactical marketing channels and the boots on the ground piece of this. I think you are still going to have to keep iterating and like testing out new things. And I think the thing to keep in mind is you're going to test out a lot of these things and it'll get you to your first 5 customers, your first 10 customers. And then your marketing strategy and your sales strategy is going to shift slightly. And what gets you to your first 10 customers probably won't be the exact same thing that gets you to your first 50 customers. And it definitely will not be the same thing that gets you to your first 100 customers. Every one of these like big step ups that you do is going to require you to shift your marketing strategy and shift how you actually go about selling. So what I would say is prep for the journey and just know that these things are going to shift. And it's going to be a constant state of just research, testing, and implementing. So that's like thing number 0 that I would keep in mind. And I think that even when you hear advice from people like me or you read articles online, it's a little bit battle tested, but it's not enough in like your specific space in your specific industry. So take the stuff that I'm saying, and there might be like a 5-degree pivot or like a 10% change that you have to do, but do that. My thought partner actually over the last like month, 2 months has like really been like ChatGPT for this kind of stuff. I'll just load up all my context into it. I'll be like, I'm Murtaza, I run this company. I'll send the URL. We're doing A, B, and C, and D, and I'm trying to do better here. And I'll post it in, get some responses. And I'll be like, okay, we tried this and we're running into this and this problem. Based off that, should I keep optimizing or should I do this other thing? And I think just like having a thought partner like that has access to all of the internet is helpful. ChatGPT is not going to solve your problems, but I think it'll clear out the cobwebs and kickstart some thinking for you too.
Ooh, I love that hack. There's so many creative ways to use ChatGPT. I need to start keeping a log of like creative prompts. Do you have any specific prompts? You shared a little bit, but what are some of those specific questions you'll ask in ChatGPT to help disentangle where to go next?
Yeah, I'm a terrible prompt engineer. I will say that. Bad at it. Yeah. So I actually just put in the question the same way I would ask it to you on a phone call of, I don't know how to do this thing. I'm really struggling with this and I want to do A, B, and C. This is some additional context just because I have a sense for the very general answers that ChatGPT is going to give. So I'll be like, here's some additional context. So for example, when I like ask questions about Heartbeat sales process, I will also specify that a lot of the people that we serve are coaches, consultants, and course creators, and that most of them are small businesses, which just have a different set of problems than what large enterprise companies have. So I'll add in some like light qualifiers like this kind of stuff to help me out. And even with the stuff that ChatGPT spits out of you should try this and this, if they give me a list of 20 things, usually 4 of them are really good, but those 4 are worth actually testing. And even the 4 are not perfect, but like with a 5% adjustment, they're pretty good. So that's the way that I approach it is it's really doing a very wide search. You can give in some qualifiers and filters like that, but it's just filtering down some of the information. And then you as a human have to do that like last layer of filtering of, okay, these 4 or 5 actually make some sense. And this is some like light tweaks I'm going to do.
Brilliant. I really love that insight. And what I hear you saying behind all of this too is your community is going to evolve. How you find your members is going to evolve. Stay flexible to testing and experimenting. And also know you're never stuck. There's always another option. There's always another way. So if what was working for you in the past to find new members isn't working today, there's always another option.
The only way out is through, right?
The only way out is through. With ChatGPT as your thought partner. Brilliant.
There we go. Powered by AI. I would absolutely plus one that summary. And what I will say is I think a lot of people look at sales and they're like, oh, if I'm really like smooth and suave and everything I say like sounds like a nice kitschy thing, like I sound like Harvey Specter from Suits, then I'm going to be a great salesperson. And what I want to say is that's a big no. That's completely incorrect. The absolute best salespeople that I know are people that are very adaptive. Anytime something new comes their way, they figure out how to adapt and adjust accordingly. And two is they put activity above everything else. It's not about, hey, let me just do these 3 really specific things. It's let me get rep after rep in. I ran this experiment, didn't work. I'm going to run the next one. I'm going to run the next one. I'm going to run the next one. And they don't try and like rest on their like in air quotes critical thinking. Instead, they just keep moving forward, keep trying new things. So I think if you position yourself as I'm going to adapt to anything that comes to me, and I'm going to focus on activity more than I'm going to focus on anything else, then those 2 things will just put you like in the top 10% of salespeople by itself.
Oof, I really love that. I think that's a super good note to send us off on. And I hear you saying, because I hear a lot of people talk about, oh, just be consistent. And I don't hear you saying that. I hear you say like activity is important, moving forward is important, trying new things is important, but it's what's important about it is the lessons that you're learning as you go and what is working for your business versus what's not.
Yeah, I think consistency helps once you've figured out something definitely works. I think consistency helps with pieces like communication of, yeah, you should send like a general, maybe weekly or monthly update to your members of what's going on. But I think that people every so often just get stuck in the consistency and don't realize that if a thing is not working, you should kill it and move on. Like you should only spend your time on the things that you know for sure are going to work. Actually, I would amend that. You should spend your time on things that have potential to work. And you should not spend your time on things that you know for sure do not work. Because then the expected return for those things is 0. But everything else, like there could be wins.
So good. This episode, I'm so excited for it. Okay, I can't wait for it to come into the world. Murtaza, thank you so much for doing this really important and often difficult work. How can our listeners find more of your work, support you, follow along? Obviously, Heartbeat will have the link for people to sign up and find out more. But how can they stay in touch with you?
Yeah, great question. We, of course, want to work with anybody that is building a really thoughtful and intentional paid community on the internet. So please come to Heartbeat and we'll help you do that. But if you just want to like jam and talk through more of these like pieces as you're building and growing and scaling a community, we actually run workshops for free every single month. And I'm the one that's actually leading them, talking about some piece of community building. It's a very active Zoom chat, like pop online, like turn on your video, drop questions in Zoom chat. We'll jam, we'll talk through it. As much as possible, I try to be super accessible. So once a month, there's always some place that you can come on Zoom and find me and we can talk through some of the stuff you're thinking through.
Don't tell the other platforms I said this, but Heartbeat workshops are my absolute favorite. The audience and the members present are like so engaged. Everyone's off camera. There's such good questions. So as someone who gets to pop in and do these workshops from time to time, couldn't recommend them more. There's such good energy on those calls.
They're one of my favorite parts of the month. I really look forward to doing them. It's just so fun to hang out with customers.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for doing this good work and for sharing some space with me on the episode.
I enjoyed it. This was such a fun time. I love diving into these like community pieces. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. All right. Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for sharing some space with me on this episode. Please like and review wherever you find your podcasts. To submit your own community conundrum, fiasco, or other drama, go to the link in the show notes. Aloha and catch you next time.